Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. This is Hillary Settle. I am the Director of Marketing here at Insightpool. And before we get started with our guest, Samantha from Forrester, I wanted to just get a few housekeeping items out of the way. On the right side, if you have any questions that you'd like to answer throughout the webinar, please put them in the bottom right section of your control panel under questions. Additionally, if there's anything that kind of comes through the webinar that we'd like to add, a link or a hashtag that we're looking to continue to drive throughout the webinar, we'll put it in the chat section. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us today, and I will be introducing Hackney, who is our President and COO here at Insightpool, to kick it off.
Thank you so much, Hillary. It's good to be here. So yeah, just a little bit of background on my side. What we're going to go through today is basically how to make social data actionable. So how do you take the deep social data you're getting? How do you turn that into marketing programs? How do you make sure that you're building authentic relationships? In partnership with Forrester, we're going to talk through the subject with you, with Samantha coming on. I'll let her introduce herself, and then I'll follow up after her presentation. For reference, my background is I've been at Insightpool about a year. In this position, leading us kind of in the direction of authentic relationships and influencer marketing. And I'll talk about that at the end. Previously, I have experience on the brand side coming from the brands of Coca-Cola here in Atlanta. Then I ran strategy at WebMD, and then I've been on the SaaS technology side for social the last 4 years, both at a company called BitTrue in social publishing, and then as a vice president at Oracle, leading a lot of their social platforms. So look forward to bringing that expertise to my discussion at the end of this. But for now, I'll turn it over to Samantha. Samantha, thanks so much for joining us.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. As Chris mentioned, my name is Samantha Ngo. I'm a researcher here at Forrester, and I cover social insights and social intelligence and social listening. So anything that has to do with taking social data, applying that across an organization, and how you measure and track your results. That is all stuff that I spend my day doing. So I'm very much looking forward to this webinar today, and let's get started. So how to make social data actionable. We'll first walk through the post-digital era based on some recent research by Forrester. Then we'll go into social insights and how they can help guide your marketing and business tactics. And then lastly, how to get started. Some practical use cases and points for how to really get your social intelligence program up and running. So first, I'll start with talking about customers today. Customers are in control because they have access to a myriad of information at their fingertips. This is something you know. As a consumer yourself, I'm sure you can think about the times that you've used your mobile phone to price check when you're actually in a physical store. And you know that customers are actually demanding more control over the interactions that they have with brands. They have heightened expectations, and they're very impatient with traditional marketing and advertising. So we're in the age of the customer, where relationships determine success. Forrester defines the age of the customer as a 20-year business cycle where the most successful companies continually evolve to better understand and serve their customers. It used to be that you could be the best if you made the best product or got it to market in the most efficient way, but now anyone can disrupt your product or distribution method. What they can't recreate is the relationship that you have with the customer. So you need to leverage and use that relationship and knowledge as your competitive edge. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not just online. For instance, you could be price checking while you're physically in a store, looking for product reviews, looking for other competitors' products to see whether or not the price difference, you could order it off Amazon versus purchasing in store, all of that. We see that as post-digital, where customers are really expecting a fluid relationship between their online interactions with you and their offline interactions. It's a shift in marketing mindset. So post-digital marketing has 3 specific rules: be human, be helpful, and be handy. The first rule, be human, is kind of what it sounds like and what you expect it to be. It's being authentic, having empathy, and being inclusive. For authenticity, it probably gets a lot of eye rolling. You know that you want to be authentic with your customers. But today, customers really do care about what's real, even if they're asking you to expose your weakness. To be empathetic, we have to remember that there's a person at the other end of that account. And often we try to use tools and technologies and other ways to automate processes where we're responding to customers, but we forget that they're actually a human being. It's not just a profile or a target or a segment of an audience. It's a person. And the last one is inclusivity, and that's participation. We know that people feel more connected to things that they help build. The second one is being helpful. Being helpful means that post-digital marketers will focus on solving customer problems rather than pushing their products. You want to build useful experiences instead of just talking about how great your product is. And that means you're also taking into account your brand promise and making sure it aligns with what customers are saying about you. If you're listening to them on social media, for instance, you want to make sure that your brand is being perceived the way that you want it to be, and that the customer experiences that you serve are also aligned with those brand promises. The last one is being handy. And post-digital marketers are deft, agile, and dexterous. They'll work across departments in the best interest of their customers. And no matter who are the people or the technology that's involved, you want to capitalize on what consumers will do with it. So going into a few examples. Being human. The first example is Taco Bell, and they're a great example of inclusivity, or that participation part of being human. Their CMO describes their strategy like this: create, co-create, and curate. Creating is creating their own content. Co-creating is content created in partnership with consumers, and curating is taking whatever user-generated content they like and showing it to more people. He says the most important ingredient in all of this is authenticity. Quote, "We are lucky we have passionate fans who do wonderful things like create dresses out of sauce packets. Now that's true passion." And it's true. You know, how many people are taking sauce packets and creating something that's fun and fashionable and something that you want to share. Taco Bell benefits from great content, and it drives engagement and discovery. And it also makes their loyal fans feel like they've been included in the process. Next one is being helpful. Red Roof Inn has won awards for their social intelligence strategies, and in 2015, they grew 350% in new franchise agreements. Even the CEO of the company claims he's obsessed with gaining insights from customers to understand what guests want and need. So, social listening, where typically you've seen it used in PR or, brand monitoring, crisis management, can actually be used in conjunction with other survey feedback forms like voice of the customer programs and guest satisfaction to really influence how you do business. And that's how you're helpful to customers. You're meeting their needs by listening and understanding what they want. Then being handy. It's moving from one-to-one to one-to-moment. We know one-to-one marketing is already pretty hard, but when we move to one-to-moment marketing, it's really about understanding what a person needs at that specific point in time. And it's necessary because the same person might have different needs at this moment rather than another one. So while you want to understand who your customer is as an individual, you also have to understand where they are in the customer lifecycle and what they might be seeking from your company. Now, influencers in particular will play a key role in this one-to-moment strategy because the crowd has a far greater capacity to create more useful content than just the brand. For example, Gatorade here has taken steps towards this. They've created a new Smart Cap bottle that paces an athlete's rehydration based on their detected sweat levels. Now, this is participation to a major degree. It's a new product, but not one that the average gym goer is going to need. Instead, it's a product that's directly geared towards their influencers, pro athletes who are helping them develop the product itself that will have an amplification effect on Gatorade's other products through their influencer participation. So it creates that participation value exchange between the brand and its consumers. So we talked a little bit about how social is involved in that post-digital, but really that was a general overview on how social can help you in the post-digital world. If we think about social media, it can obviously give you a lot of information about your customer. Starting from their conversations, you can understand how they interact on social, what they talk about, and when and where they seek information from your brand. But it starts with your audience and an understanding of what social networks they use and what they need from your brand in that specific channel. In our recent social technographics research, we found that 31% of U.S. online adults are social stars, which means that they demand interactions with your company on social channels. And we found that 27% expect interactions, that we call them social savvies. But it's important to remember that not all brands are going to have a social presence because their customers aren't looking for them on social channels, and they're not looking to interact. So the first step is really understanding how your customers are using social and whether or not they're looking for specific information. Now, social can give you richer insights to apply across the organization as well. This is the understanding of the individual here, not just the segment. Through your conversations, you can understand how your customers are talking to each other, what they might be looking for in a particular moment. For example, if you're looking for intent to purchase, you might be searching in your queries for, needing a new car, or sad my car broke down, and those are the types of moments that you want to capitalize on. So that insight is enabling you to take action, to do something about it, and that could vary across an organization. The example I just gave you, you might create a lead or push them to the sales team. If you were to think of another example, going back to the Red Roof Inn one, for example, that one was about construction and building new rooms and features that customers are looking for. So it might be product innovation. Those are the types of things that you can get off social data. Because it is unstructured and unfiltered information, you're really getting at the heart of what your customers want and need from you. So if we think about it, we can take demographic information, interests, affinities, the topics of conversation that people are having on social, and it can inform a lot of different things. In our recent wave research, for example, in the social listening wave of Q1 2016, what we found was that brands are starting to use social insights in new ways. For example, testing campaign content or creating target audience groups that they then move into their sales channel or their marketing team to see whether or not their messages are resonating. So for example, if you think that one of your target markets likes puppies, you're going to make sure that you include puppies in whatever campaign content you create and then measure the success of that campaign. So social intelligence is really about reiterating that measurement process and understanding that social insights and what happens on social can actually be a test and can improve other processes or other content. So being able to measure the success of that campaign, whether it's through engagement or sharing or the conversation uplift that happens after the campaign has rolled out, those are the types of things that you want to be looking for. There was a British retailer, for example, who noticed that there was frequent social activity overnight from pregnant women and new parents who were having a hard time sleeping. So what they did was they saw that as an opportunity to connect with and show empathy to their customers. So what they did was they created this thing called 2 a.m. Club, and they scheduled their social posts to go out at 2 a.m. because they knew that part of their target demographic was awake and looking for content at that hour. So those posts distributed specific offers to those new parents and pregnant women, and tips and tricks on new parenting for new parents, and it generated between 700 and 2,000 comments in response in their overnight posts. So they saw a lot of engagement from that, and that's just one example of how you can use social insights and apply it to something else, making your program smarter. Now, with the marketing team in particular, this is somewhere where social insights has always been important, right? We've always measured how our social campaigns are doing. But what I encourage you to think about is how social insights can be applied differently within your marketing team. In our wave from 2015, what we found was a lot of marketers struggled with with three specific, well, a couple of specific things, but three things that social insights can help with. So the first is finding and creating content to publish. The second is deciding what type of content to publish. And the third is deciding when to publish posts for maximum impact. As we saw from the previous example of Mother Care and their 2 a.m. posts, you can track how many people are engaging at specific times, but not a lot of people are thinking to use that as a way of targeting their audience. You can leverage that insight because you have an idea of when people are active on social. Deciding what type of content to publish. Again, this is about testing. What's possible with social listening is the ability to do some A/B testing on specific campaigns to see whether or not the message is resonating. For example, you might measure sentiment change over time. You might see whether or not how many shares it's getting, what type of traction, is conversation changing. All of those things are possible using social listening. And then finding and creating content to publish. Again, that kind of goes back to what we said about co-creating user-generated content and sharing that, and understanding who your influencers are and being able to pick them out to see whether or not specific messages are resonating with them because they are your best customers. Part of that as well is if you chose to co-create or use them for user-generated content, understanding what types of things that they're talking about, even if it's tangential to your own brand and to your products. Another way to think about using social data is across the customer lifecycle. So this kind of goes back to that one-to-moment the one-to-moment we were talking about earlier, where you have to think about what a specific customer might be looking for at a given time or on a given channel rather than just knowing the customer and who they are. And while that's important, there is that understanding of, when you're in an explore phase, you might go to a ratings and review site versus Facebook. That might not be true of all your customers. So where are your customers coming to you for specific information? If it is Facebook that they're coming to you to explore your product, do you have frequently asked questions as part of your Facebook page? If they're coming to you on Twitter when they want to ask for support or they need they have specific questions about your product, are you staffed and do you have the resources to be able to answer them on those channels, or do you direct them in the right way? So to walk through just a few examples of how social insights have been applied across an organization, this first one you might be familiar with is Yoplait. And what they did was a couple years ago, they removed all high fructose corn syrup from their Yoplait product. And what actually inspired this change in their product was a customer. A customer had tweeted and said, I really wish that someone would think about removing high fructose corn syrup. It's not good for you, obviously all the health implications of it. And what they found was that their customers really took to this. People were really interested in taking high fructose corn syrup out, and after all, they were like, okay, we think this is worth it. So not only did they remove high fructose corn syrup from all of their yogurts, what they did was they actually used this as a marketing campaign. So you see here some screenshots from that ad, and as they took what they did because it was so important. We're listening to our customers. We understand what you want and need, and we're actually going to make the changes. They were very smart in using that as part of their marketing campaign to say, you are important to us. And they were able to relay that message by doing exactly that. So another example here is Mattress Buying. There was a mattress company who thought they knew when people would buy new mattresses, and it's sort of what you expect, right? It's when you get married, when you have kids, when you're moving, you might buy a new mattress. But what they were looking to find out was where were other opportunities for them to be selling mattresses. And through social listening, what they found was that high-performance endurance athletes buy mattresses more often than your average person. So, they started doing specific marketing around athletes. They'd put running shoes next to specific beds. They started hosting some marathons and races and things like that to really get their name out there. So social insights here is another way for you to find new target audiences. And then social can be used to track brand health as well. And I think this is one place where most people have always thought that they were doing this, right? Brand monitoring, in the sense of, let's make sure that we're doing okay, has always been a way of the world with social listening. But here, what I'm really talking about is linking it to brand health tracking metrics that CMOs and other marketing professionals have always used for other channels outside of social. And I think when social was pretty nascent, it was harder to make these matches. But in order to convince other people in the organization that social data matters, and that it's reliable and valid, it's good to map it back to something that they already understand. So for example, awareness is a typical brand health tracking metric that you might look at, and the social data counterpart to that is reach. I mentioned this earlier, purchase intent. You might be looking for purchase words like I'm looking to buy a new, can anyone give me a recommendation on? And then brand preference, that's like the number of fans or followers, and then the ability to command a premium price. So locating any type of money words or any indication of pricing or expensive, cheap, that kind of stuff. Like we said, one of the hardest things for social marketers is to measure the success of their efforts. And partly this is because when social first came about, people got trapped in measuring likes and quantifiable things like retweets and shares that they thought was helping, because they saw that as the right type of things to measure, but a like hasn't necessarily been linked to a purchase ever. So part of this is trying to understand how you can use social insights and put it into action to relate to things that might be measured outside of social marketing. And really that the true value in social is that it's that place to be human, as we talked about in post-digital. So how can you track it to something that's quantifiable? And where can you implement the right changes in order to get dollar values or change the process to make your customer experience better? Those are the types of things that you want to use social to do. So how do you do it? Like getting started with the 4 Ps. So Forrester has laid out a framework for running through a social intelligence and building social intelligence. And the first is purpose, people, platform, and processes, and it's in that order. So I'll go into them a little bit more deeply, but we refer to them as the 4 Ps. So the first is purpose, and that is really about, what is your business purpose? Often our clients come to us with sort of they have a social strategy in mind, and they're like, okay, we're going to be on we're going to publish X amount of posts between these hours because we know that's when our audience is most engaged. And then we turn around and ask them, but why are you doing that? And sometimes they sort of stare blankly at us and they say, well, it's because people are on social, but that's not really an answer. You need to have a purpose for why you're using your social insights. So for example, you might have a business purpose like finding new product ideas, targeting new audience or finding new audiences, and finding trouble spots along the customer journey. So these are a couple of questions that might come to mind here, but I can't iterate enough how important it is to define your business goals first. If you're improving customer support, for example, and that's your purpose, you want to set goals around decreasing the volume of support in other channels, such as phone or email, maybe measuring SLAs, and seeing how being active on social reduces that. And that just, it's good business practice, and it gives you more room with other management in order to say, well, look, this is how we saved money. So that is one thing to keep in mind, that purpose should always lead your functions. And secondly, it's people. It's the people who lead the function, it's people who manage the data, and people who interpret the data. So social intelligence requires obviously some big picture planning, and it needs someone to drive that strategy. So the person who's the leader here owns the vendor relationship. They have to be the change agent by influencing other teams to improve cross-channel marketing performance. And they're also the evangelist for the value of social intelligence. Like I said earlier, if you map it back to a purpose, it helps to make the story for social intelligence, but you also need the people who believe in it and can do that mapping. The dashboard administrators, those are some people who will have the most hands-on role. Also, your analysts will have a pretty hands-on role, but what you need is people to manage and interpret the data. So administrative skills, Boolean search construction, people who can do daily searches, and the maintenance that you need in order to keep culturally relevant. And also the 3 roles that you need for social intelligence, where you have to have someone who identifies risks and opportunities, and then also communicates those findings to the rest of the business. So it's important to remember that tools only get you so far, but tools can show you social data and roll up some social insights, but in order to take action, it really requires the right people in the right places to communicate, what's happening out there and why you might need to make some business changes according to what your customers are saying. Then we move into platform, where strong platforms really have strong strategies around integration. And like I said earlier, it's kind of about validating social data and understanding that that's really the first place to start. After you've determined your purpose, you want to make sure that your data is valid and that you can prove its value and worth. So with the platforms, you know that different social technologies process information and data and display certain insights according to how their NLP is structured and how they've processed that data and show it to you in a specific dashboard. So it's really about testing your platforms and making sure that the right and relevant messages are getting across to the right people. It might be about reporting and alerts, for example. Do the right people have the right information in a given dashboard? Are they getting reports or alerts around specific things? And then really taking into consideration the metrics as well. It goes back to your purpose and whether or not your platform can display the information you need to display in order to take the right measurements and show that you are improving, or such and such needs a different process because they're not performing so well. And then lastly, processes. This is about managing the incoming data, formalizing systems for identifying insights, establishing workflows for managing and distributing those insights. That all falls into processes here. So what gets flagged, for example, what needs to go to legal if something is a big issue, and also around crisis management, what needs to happen next, what are the triggers, all of that. Formalizing a system for identifying insights really is about brainstorming what valuable insight will look like for your goals. For example, if a marketer is planning to track social media to set up an outreach program for their customers, they have to be prepared and able to identify what would be a negative, positive, and neutral, and override the automated sentiment scoring if necessary. So, getting your people trained with a playbook or something in hand where they know this has to be marked as X, Y, or Z. And then establishing a workflow for managing and distributing insights last. We know that social intelligence functions can span the enterprise beyond marketing and to customer support. And teams have to staff in order to distribute the insights in the right way. So each role can benefit from what your customers are saying. People often don't think about social insights outside of outside of their crisis support or marketing or customer support. But again, product innovation, HR use cases for employee engagement, social data really can be used in a lot of ways, and it helps to understand, because it helps to understand who your customers are and what they want. It really can affect operations and a whole bunch of things across your business. So lastly, the key takeaways: integrate social media data with customer insights. If you're a mature organization, you've probably started to do this and think about what areas social media can add to or influence, your certain business procedures. But to my point earlier, using other ways, other data to validate what you're finding in social really helps to find that value in social data, and that it can be leveraged and used in a way that gives you more information even than some of the survey answers that you're getting about customer satisfaction. Again, because it's unsolicited, you'll learn a lot more from your social data if your customer's on social media, because they're not boxed in by a specific answer that you're asking with your brand survey. Sharing social media data with other roles, that's really how social insights can help indicate how other marketing programs are going. It's having an understanding of how your customers use your product, what they seek in a given place on social, in a blog, for example, and helps you serve up the right type of information and interactions that they're looking for. And then lastly, tracking towards business goals. Always start with a purpose, and think of it outside of what your technology can enable. In your ideal world, what is your strategy? Why are you doing it? And then after that, only after that, can you figure out what are the right platforms to support you? Who are the right people that need to go into it? It really starts with having that business goal in mind so that you can track and figure out, is this working? And with that, we will move on to Chris, who will walk you through the modern marketer's paradox.
Thank you, Samantha. It's great to hear those thoughts from Forrester and from yourself. Appreciate it. So what I'm going to talk about is, kind of bring it home into an area that's really important for a lot of the folks we know, which is influencer marketing and how we make all of this actionable. When we talk about the modern marketer's paradox, it's a very simple concept for us, and it sets up a lot of what we do and what these industries do that we work within. As a marketer, you know more about your customer than any marketer who ever came before you. I was in brand 9-10 years ago at Coke, and to know what we know now about customers, I would have died for on the brand side. And so much of what you did was demographics based. You're looking at common groups, women 25 to 49, and how can I target them, and how can I, as a group, appeal to them? And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. You definitely knew you had a lot of waste in there, right? And the paradox is very simple. Like, how do I, with what I know, knowing all of that information, how do I find ways to hyper target at scale, right? So how do I get to, Samantha mentioned one-to-one leading into one-to-moment, but how do I get personalized? How do I get to that level where someone's really excited to hear from me as a brand, or that as a brand, I'm relevant to them? But at the same time, how do I scale? If I am a big brand, I can do that maybe for 10 people, 100 people. What are the number of people, the thousands that I have to have relevant conversations or interactions with to move the needle for my business? And so we work with companies like Big Green Egg, where that's a smaller number, right? It's a regional brand with a loyal following, and maybe 1,000 people will work. A bigger brand like a Craftsman or a Home Depot might be talking about hundreds of thousands, and they're getting into kind of how do I mine that data for relevant interactions, both in organic and paid. So what we start to focus on is, social is a data problem. If you're thinking about hyper targeting at scale, how do you take all these data points, turn them into something actionable, and then organize your effort against that? And where we come in as a tech company, or many do, is that a lot of the solutions in overcoming that paradox start with the technology solution. Technology is amazing at bridging those gaps, even as we look at a company like Twitter, who, while their user growth has stalled, still commands 300 million daily users, active users. That's a lot of profiles. That's a lot of information. That's a lot of conversations happening on an ongoing basis. How do you synthesize that and turn that into something you can use as a marketer? So if you switch over real quick, Samantha, next. So in the space, as we talk about marketing technology, it's evolved really rapidly. Like I said, while the data points have exploded, so has the technology solutions. And a lot of our clients are dealing with, a lot of conversations around, the suite versus point solution kind of thing. I want to use the best in breed for everything, but I also want to only train up and know one or two things. It's a common issue, right? So you have an explosion of marketing technologies. Insightpool is one of those. And it's evolving rapidly. For us, what's interesting when we always put this slide up is, it looks like the future is more to the right. I would tell you, with a lot of our clients, that a lot of where we say, even as we evolve rapidly, we're still more on the left of this screen, right? We're just above a candlestick. And the part of that is, we're still going from a learn phase to an automate stage. And you've seen this in email automation and some of the marketing technology you've already used. To get to the right hand of the stage, there are two big things that marketing technology is still going to have to evolve to help you guys as marketers. The first is to move from automation to prediction, the idea that I know enough about someone to really drive a relevant conversation with them and predict where they want to go. On one hand, I'd love to, if I'm selling car insurance, to be able to mine social data to find out when someone has damaged their car and it might be in the market for new car insurance or a new car from a car company. But I'd really like to understand what are the signals people throw off to anticipate when they might be in the market for what I do versus the obvious direct tell. That's where the future of this is going to head. The second way marketing technology is really going to evolve is by synthesizing the sheer amount of data still to come. And while we get tripped up on the billions of data points that are already there, through social and things like that, what we have to understand is the data flow is going to get 10 times deeper moving forward for most of us. We haven't even talked about yet the flood of data that's going to come in through mobile, the flood of data that's going to come in through Internet of Things. Those are all going to be rapidly developing markets that you have to think about and how your technology does that. We always love to use the example of Google in this space, in the sense that Google is a media company through and through. But Google has made big acquisitions recently, Nest, Waze for directional navigation. The reason they own all these things is because those are master data sources for future efforts. And while I'm sure they would say they don't understand yet how they're going to monetize each of those yet, the truth is they're going to monetize the data in some form. And so as a marketer, as that data starts to come out, you have to even think ahead in that regard. So for us, Sam, thanks for getting to the slide. So for us, a lot of this comes down to how you think different in how you think about influencer marketing. And that's about influencer marketing for us is about direct relationships with the audiences you don't have yet. And so when we talk about making social data actionable, a lot of the history of social data has been around the audiences I control, either an audience that's come to me and followed me or liked me, and what do I do with them? Or the audience that's throwing out direct signals to me, usually that I'm picking up in a listening tool. I've been on a Delta flight and they've complained about that flight, and how do I push that into my customer service chain? There are a lot of good kind of advancements there, but the biggest advancement on the horizon right now is the idea of influencer marketing, which is forget the audiences who are sending you direct signals. Think about the audiences in the rest of that universe that are very open to what you do and what your value prop is and how you can help them, right? They are a silent majority in a lot of ways as it relates to your brand. And how do you start to engage them proactively versus waiting for a reactive moment that they come into the fold with you? Okay. So if you click next, Sam, thank you. So we have a basic approach to this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our framework next for it. But what you really have to think about is how do you use that social data you're pulling in through technology or your agency relationship or even your internal community team, and start to think about how you make that actionable and with a purpose, though. The purpose we always espouse is on this slide, which is very simple. First, you've got to be building authentic relationships, not paid endorsements. There is a limited scope where a paid endorsement can help you and sponsor, but for the most part, there are hundreds of millions of people out there who are influential in their own right with the right conversation to drive relevance for the brand. And that's where we do get to a very interesting conversation on our side around that one-to-moment discussion that Samantha had earlier. You have to be picking up three types of data to really be relevant and authentic and to a brand. The first is conversations. Are you picking up the conversations they're having at the moment they're having them? Second is their characteristics. What things in profiles and other characteristics around their activity in social and other places might make them relevant to your brand? And then the third is affiliations. What does their network look like to make it relevant to what you do? And if you're looking at all three of those, you'll know the moment to come into a conversation with someone or a relationship and start to build something deeper with your brand. And so we focus a lot on that. While it's harder, it's something that can easily be done with the right tool sets in place. Second is about creating ongoing relationships built on shared value. As a brand, you're constantly in the motion of asking for other people to do something for you, especially in social or other areas leading up to a purchase in most cases. A lot of times you have to step back as a brand and ask, well, what are we doing to give them value back? Whether it's at a very basic level with coupons or discounts, it's providing them with thought leadership and knowledge through webinars and ebooks. Or even the fact that most of the people who want to influence in social would like to see brands, promote what they do, not just be asked to promote what the brand is doing. So think about what your shared value is, and are you delivering that as an ongoing relationship? The third piece of this is omni-channel approach. Go where influencers feel most at home, whether that's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. The rules are different in each space. You're particularly confronted with an environment, for most of you who are interested in Snapchat, of a limited Snapchat API environment or metrics environment. But go where those influencers are comfortable and figure out the best approaches within each of those environments. And then last, looking at real results backed by strong metrics improvement over time. We have a big philosophy here at Insightpool with most of our clients that your first hypothesis on how to approach a relationship, even with the best data, is just a starting point, right? You're going to be wrong. We always say marketing is a study in failure. Even the best marketing programs, the engagement rates with them are almost always in the single digits. So every time you go out, 90% plus of those you tried to reach don't respond at all. And so the question is, how do you overcome that? And you apply a scientific method through technology and other things you use to say, hey, we're going to start with a hypothesis. We're going to test that out with a limited audience. And we're going to study what makes those who are engaging with us different from those who aren't. And you have enough data points to do that now. We call it microcluster analysis and how we approach it. But through that, you look at your results and you say, hey, for the 9% that engaged with us, what was special about them? What was common? And then you mirror those audiences, you scale those audiences, and you optimize. You might optimize through additional organic outreach in social, or you might move that to a paid cycle through your ads optimization side. But at the end of the day, you're going to continuously be in a learn and optimize mode. That is really, really important as you think about how you make social data actionable. The last thing I'll say on the slide is there is no silver bullet. I don't want anyone to take away from a webinar that these are the 4 things I do. The 4th thing you always do is learn and optimize off of what failed the first time you did it, and then get better at it. So if you do the right takeaways for any campaign, you'll see that strengthen and you'll see continuous improvement over time. So, Sam, if you go to the next one real quick. The example we have real quick to leave you with is something we recently did with Craftsman. When you get into technology, what technology allows you to do is identify influencers really quickly through the social data out there, and then start to engage them in a predictable pattern, right? That will elicit relationships. So in this case, a typical client of ours is someone like Craftsman Tools, right? They're coming to us with what they call their Made to Race campaign, which is they know a large part of their user base has a passion for NASCAR and racing, right? And they want to develop that one-to-moment with them through social around that passion point. They also know that there's unprecedented support for female drivers in this space. And so how do you take the excitement around folks like Danica Patrick and others that they sponsor and support and turn that into something that's a strong brand message across an influencer group? And that's what we help them do. So in cases like this, You go out and you identify female racing enthusiasts, those who have talked about the subjects I talked about, conversations first. Are they talking about NASCAR? Are they talking about particular drivers? You're looking at their characteristics. Have they checked in at a race ever? Have they put racing in their profiles and other things like that? And then you're looking at their affiliations. Have they started to follow someone like Danica Patrick or others? And you start to put that together to find out who are the most influential people that we should be talking to. And you start to build custom engagement with them in activation campaigns. So in this case, it was a Twitter campaign, custom outreach, app mentions, DMs, etc., out to those audiences. You measure who's engaging and who's not, and then you do multiple touch points with those who come back and begin a conversation. And they are conversations that start relationships. And then finally, you start to add on new components. So if all of this is working and it's highly automated in that sense, you can start to add in things like UGC, user-generated content campaigns, and sweepstakes, and start to put legs behind what is an initial outreach that gets them excited, gets them driving a lot of influence. In our cases, we see things like extremely high reply rates, 80% plus. We see high acquisition rates, which is usually a conversion over to a website or URL environment. And so we like to think that, hey, you can start to solve this marketer's paradox of reach versus engagement by employing the right tools against what social data you're seeing and starting to build real relationship and real audiences off of that. And so that's why we love the work that Forrester's doing in this space around how do you take social data and make it actionable. What we try and do is apply that in practice every day with our clients. And if anyone on this call is interested, please let us know. We're happy to talk to you as well on that subject. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Chris. It's Hillary again. We have had a few questions come through for both of the panelists. So I wanted to kind of throw them out and then see who feels, I guess, that the question sort of applies to them. If it's Chris or you, Samantha. So the first one is, how would the approach in making data actionable differ between an always-on effort or a campaign that you're running? And sort of how does that differentiate with a marketing strategy?
Samantha, do you want to take that or would you like me to?
I can go first if you'd like. Okay. So we actually just finished a report on the processes for social, or real-time processes for social media. And I think a big part of the always-on versus campaign question is really kind of, it is about the processes you have in place and the people and the resources that you've dedicated to the specifics of always on versus campaign. So for example, in an always on, you might be having someone who constantly monitors the incoming messages that are happening, the customer questions, monitoring for industry news. It requires planning with a master playbook and understanding that everyone sort of has their tasks to do within an always-on campaign or an always-on strategy. And you might use sort of a huge technology stack to do that. So social listening tools, relationship platforms, measurement platforms, and then be able to optimize those processes. So I think the big difference between always-on and campaign is really the types of things that the people within each department is looking at. So in always on, you are looking for the overall brand, you're looking at customer questions, while for campaign you might be optimizing or looking at specifics around a set time period. It's about the assets that you produce, whether or not you're using like a content management system or social media management system in order to have all of the right content in place and ready to go for each channel, because it'll differ per channel. So it's really about the functions being different in how you're staffed. Chris?
I'd add, what I'd add on to, I think that's a very solid and in line with where we think about it. The thing I'd add on to that for a lot of the folks on the phone is just, it's interesting to us, always on versus pulse. Most people in organizations get excited by the pulse side, right? We've got a big thing going on. Everyone's going to get geared up for it. It's like a football team on game day, right? Everything's going to gear around it. And that excitement can propel success in a lot of instances. Always on gets people less excited for some reason, but it's 10 times more important. And be excellent. What we say with Always On our side always is Always On is about everyday excellence, and everyday excellence is about processes and organizations that are properly in place to handle the everyday blocking and tackling, and to find that one moment where things can really take off, right, in the haystack of everything else going on. And so Always On for us is about, do you have your organization in place? Do you have your processes in place? Do you have your technology stack in place? To do on both inbound Always On, constant monitoring of the activity, the conversations that are taking place, and picking those up and properly responding to them or amplifying them. And then on the other side with Always On, having a proper Always On output, right? So it's in reaction to some of what's going on, but what are the Always On relationship aspects you guys are generating content and discussions on to drive thought leadership in a space, or to drive your sales process in a space? So it's not just gearing up for the big game day, but what is the everyday blocking and tackling that, if you're applying everyday excellence to what you do, will pay off in the end? And so that's kind of how we differentiate it on our side.
One thing to add, Chris, you just reminded me for Always On is also the idea that you want to always be on brand, right? So are you delivering your brand promises in your everyday interactions? And that's one thing to remember and easy to forget.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We always have a lot of clients. I think everyone in our industry loves and hates the Oreo dunk in the dark example.
Oh, yeah.
But to us, with a lot of our clients, it has an important lesson, right? And this is where technology and other things have advanced. It looked like an Always On, but it really was carefully choreographed. And at the time, right, only a brand like Oreo really could pull something like that off. They had to put together an entire on-the-ground team to monitor activity at the time, and then drive a creative process in motion, and then distribute it. What we tell clients a lot is, while you might be sick of that example, the opportunity to do so has now been democratized with technology and kind of how groups are set up now, to at any moment, it might not be on the Super Bowl stage, but to insert your brand in a relevant way to a conversation that's already got heat, and add to the conversation in a way that people find funny, intriguing, thought-provoking, whatever it might be, as long as it's on brand, as you mentioned. But it's very interesting to us that, what Oreo could do 5 years ago, because they had the resources to do so, almost any brand can do today on any stage they're looking at, if they put the resources in place and make sure that they've got everything lined up. So, cool.
That's a good point.
Cool. Great, thanks. So, how do you see the blended relationship between, marketers, agencies, technology, all coming together to, make sure that these efforts are being made to have social data actually actionable? Because I think a lot of brands, I know that we are challenged with that a lot. Brands come to us and say, hey, we have all these different sort of moving pieces and data coming from different sources. Like, how do we make sure that it's all being done properly?
Samantha, I'll take that one, and then I'll turn it over to you since you did the last one.
Sure.
It's an interesting question. It's one we get all the time. I can't tell you how many times we go into client meetings, and they know other clients we work with, and they're like, well, how do they do it? And I guarantee you that other client that they ask how do they do it is asking, well, how do they do it? No one's really got it figured out organizationally on how it should align yet between the agencies and technology. Some areas are more mature than others. In our case of social, right, actionability, most have figured out their stack as it relates to publishing and listening. But areas like response management, customer service are still being developed, especially as, hey, even if they figured it out in the US, well, now they're trying to expand that to 37 other countries and 16 languages. They're still figuring that out. So there's different phases of it. So while there is still chaos, I would say there are a couple of things that are universally coming together better as it relates to social data and how it's actionable. The first is that social and kind of the aspects of it around data are not off on an island anymore. Most major companies are bringing social into the fold of most major disciplines in the company. So instead of there being a social team that leads into a digital team that leads into a brand team, and then marketing tries to talk to other groups, now have other groups folded into direct social data access. So if I'm a major auto company who we've worked with in the past, and I have customer service issues, the customer service and operation teams are now getting direct feeds of that data, and versus it being a marketing effort pushing that over. So I do think you see social data as an overlay of most major systems and groups. in a way you didn't see 4 or 5 years ago, and that's a big step forward. I only think that will accelerate even more as we get to the next 4 or 5 years. And it just becomes, it's not social data anymore, it's just data that's incoming. So that's one of the biggest things we see, as well as these groups folding into working groups a little more closely with the rest of the organization. Samantha, any other?
Yeah. I totally agree with you, Chris, that it's chaos for sure. What I would add to that in terms of maturity and strategy thinking, as well as that, I see a lot of organizations who are moving some parts of their social strategy in-house because they have the most business expertise, and they know what their overall company strategy is, which is sometimes hard for their agencies or vendors to really play out for them. So I think there are pros and cons to owning those social functions where, if you don't have the resources to do it, you're not going to do it well, then that becomes a problem in and of itself. And agencies might have the most, cross-brand experiences, or they've done content forever. So they definitely have more expertise there, but I think it's really about balancing, what skills you have in-house versus what skills, your vendor and your agencies might have. But then thinking through the strategy and really having that strong connection of, okay, but remember what we're doing this for, and relaying that to the partners that you bring into social and the whole realm here.
Yeah, and it's interesting on that last point. A lot of what we see consistently across every survey we see, the number one inhibitor of doing more with social data and social activation is the idea that the metrics to purchase aren't strong enough, right? The direct correlation moving the business. And I do think that is a maturation point that we'll get to later. I was part of digital extremely early, and it was the same question for digital. I'll move my dollars over the minute I can see that digital converts to sales. Then I'll move my dollars over the day I can see that mobile converts to sales. And you're seeing the same thing with social. And so I think the tracking tools have to standardize and catch up with the power of the I think that's the biggest inhibitor we see today. Cool.
All right. And as we're kind of closing up on the hour, we'll have one more question. When somebody asks, being human, being helpful, being handy, as a brand, when you're trying to sort of scale this process on engaging your audiences authentically and effectively, are there any sort of best practices or tips that either of you would have for, the modern marketer that's sort of dealing with this challenge?
I'll let you take that, Samantha, since it's your model.
Yeah, sure. I think, it goes back to that purpose and strategy, and really having the training and the playbooks in place to make sure that everyone knows sort of how to handle a situation. If we take that idea of being human, back to the basics, it's about understanding how someone wants you to react to what they've said. And if someone is very angry, the last thing they want is an automated response that says, we're sorry about this problem, but please call our contact center, right? So I think the best practices is really ensuring that you have the right skills in-house and the right resources and the right people in place who understand where your strategy is going with regard to the brand, your brand promise, and living that out. And then, how to interact on social. I think it's kind of a nuanced thing, but I remember someone saying to me once, they have to know the difference between there, and there. And that's something that you have to hire for and think about. So I would say resources and skill set is probably the number one, and the number two is that training and understanding across the board about having everyone on the same page and having the same strategy.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to jump on real quick. The only thing I'd add to that is, what's most important typically with the helpful, human, and handy piece is there's two ways you look at this world in social, right? The things you instigate and you want to be a part of, and the things that come at you in the middle of the night, right? So whether it's a service issue or others. And you have to absolutely be clear on what your strategy and what your brand position is and what's true to that brand going into either scenario, especially the ones that come at you. And so we tell brands all the time that, you might not have to think about it now, but it's better to think about it ahead of time before it hits you in the face and you're dealing with it at 2 a.m., right? Especially with a VP who's extremely angry about something with the customer. The funny story I'll just add on to that was I had the pleasure of when I was on the Coke brands, we got slapped in the face with what I'd consider probably one of the first social viral memes ever, which was Diet Coke and Mentos, if anyone's old enough to remember that. And the fun part of that, right, is as a brand, you love that people are interacting with your brand in a certain way. You're on the news. This is kind of trending. It's great, except one big problem. Diet Coke is about sophistication and fashion and kind of an upper class side. And people are trying to make your product explode. That's not exactly on brand message. So you have to know going in what's true to your brand. And even though something's popular, is that something that's on point for brand and you really want to promote or be a part of, or at least your brand is irrelevant and you want to acknowledge it and acknowledge people's fun with it? You have to know what your brand purpose is and position is, and then react to those things with that in mind in a very clear and coherent way. So.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Samantha. We always enjoy having, Forrester working with us. Great research has been coming out from your teams, specifically around, social data and how to make it actionable. And, we really value that over here at Insightpool. So, for everyone else on the line, we will be following up with an email with this recording and a bit more information for you. We'd love to continue the conversation with us on social media. We're on Twitter at Insightpool, but we have Samantha and Chris's handles there as well. So definitely connect with us there. So thank you so much, Samantha, and thank you, Chris, for hosting the webinar.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.